it should. Yeah, it started now. So sorry for the interruption, and let's continue. Animesh, go ahead.
Animesh, you're muted.
Okay, are we here? I guess you can see the screen.
Yeah,
Uh,
we can hear you. Yeah, we can see your screen. Go ahead.
One second. I'm sorry, I'm not on. I'm not connected to. Yeah. Hello. Uh, yeah, I hope you can
Go
hear me.
ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So yeah, what we were saying is that we're looking at 2019's Google Hashcode problem, and they start by talking some stuff about their Google Photos platform, and they say that a single photo is described by a set of tags. Uh, they are asking us to put together a slideshow, which is a ordered list of slides, and each slide is made up of either one horizontal image or two vertical images. Each image has a bunch of tags, so the tags of the slides are either the same as the tags of the horizontal image if it's made up of single horizontal image, or the union of the tags of the two slides if it is made up of two vertical images. Next, they say that our objective through this is going to be to maximize the minimum of the set intersection and the set difference here. So I don't know if they have. Okay, I guess they'll talk about it soon. So yeah, each photo must have at least one slide. Each slideshow must have at least one slide, and it is okay for us to ditch photos altogether. However, each slide must have two vertical photos. We cannot have a slide with just one single vertical photo. So yeah, they talk about their input format. Essentially, it's just the orientation of each photo followed by the uh, list of tags belonging to that photo. And they have added the total number of photos at the top and the total number of tags for input convenience. And in our output, we are trying to put together a list of slides. So each slide can be either a single number like 0 or 3, or it can be a pair of numbers like 1 and 2. Given that the single numbers are horizontal, correspond to indices of horizontal images, and the pair of numbers both correspond to indices of vertical images. And when we are trying to write out a hash code solution, it is going to be of some importance to us to check, to code all of this solution validators up and a basic checker up, so like a basic scorer up, so that we can ensure that our solutions don't go awry and we end up with invalid solutions, because that's reasonably likely to happen as you try out different approaches. Anyways, so here is our objective. We are trying to maximize this objective over every pair of consecutive slides. So we have a slide I and a slide I plus 1, and they have some sort of tag intersection over here, garden in this example, and they have a some set difference. The left difference of the two sets is cat, and the right difference is selfie and smile. We are trying to maximize the cardinality of the minimum of all of these three. So we want to essentially try to balance this overlap and difference out. So we want to have the approximately the same amount in the first slide that's not in the second, what we want to have in both the slides together, and what we want to have in what is in the second slide and not in the first. Anyway, so this is going to be our objective function, and yeah, so that's more or less our task. Let me also start a little by talking about how we are going to set up our environment. So we'll try to have a single
Animesh,
directory, and
sorry to
Farhan, if you
interrupt.
can.
Yeah, just like
Go
this
ahead.
is an interactive session, everyone. So, and this is a beginner session. So feel free to interrupt. We are not expecting any hash code awareness beforehand. The problem statement, as you saw, was pretty real practical. I would say that they're trying to make an interesting slideshow, which is something you might also want to make. So just feel free to ask if you have any particular doubts. Like this format may be new to you. You are generally used to submitting a code, but you are being asked to submit a text file of the slideshow. So like if you have any, like so far we have discussed the problem statement only. So if you have any concerns about that, you can like ask. Now is the best time because
Yeah.
otherwise we'll move on.
Yeah, so I understood the objective. There are only 2 slides, but what if there are multiple slides? Then what do we maximize?
Yeah, so we are trying to maximize this over every pair of consecutive slides. So, so you have 1,000 slides. You are trying to maximize the sum of these objectives over 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4, 4 and 5, and so on, only for a consecutive pair of slides.
Got it. Thank you.
So there was a question in the chat. We are trying to optimize, as Animesh said, the sum over all these scores. So if you, Animesh, can you show the formula, the minimum? There are 3 regions in this Venn diagram.
This is the
and yeah, so in this Venn diagram, you can see 3 different regions. So the left region of size 1, the middle of size 1, the intersection, and the right. Basically, we call it the right difference, the left difference, and the intersection. So they have different sizes, and then you have to take the minimum size. So this is the score for 2 consecutive slides. Now add these scores up for all consecutive slides, and you get the interest factor of this slideshow. So obviously, if you have a slideshow, you only care about the overlap of 2 consecutive slides and nothing else. So it's also written at the bottom that the score is the sum of the transitions. So I hope the objective is clear now, that what we have a problem and what are we trying to improve our score on. Like this the key point in hash code is the score. So how better you can get, like can you beat 100,000, 1 million? That's the target. So this is the number that we'll be trying to improve over our coding. So go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
also-
but
yeah, go on.
how can we change the input? Like, what are we allowed to do to the input to get our answer?
You are outputting the order of slides, right? So you are so essentially I told you that first slide and the score between the first slide and the second slide, the second and the third. But which slide is the first and which slide is the second? You are allowed to reorder these slides essentially. You are asked to give a permutation. So you are asked to do 2 things. First of all, you are giving a permutation. Look at this. You are giving 0, 3, and then 1 and 2 together. So you are doing 2 things. You are clubbing the vertical slides together. You decide which slides you want to club. So you want to club these 2 slides together, or there may be 2 more vertical slides. So do you want to club vertical slide number 1 with 2 and 3 with 4, or do you want to club 1 with 3 and 2 with 4? So this is one freedom that you are given. The other freedom is how do you want to order these slides? Because you are not computing the score over all pairs. You are only computing the score over adjacent pairs in your output list, right? So this ordering and this grouping, these are the 2 things that are in your hand. Wait, am I there? Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope that's clear. Garangas.
Yeah, I guess we can go ahead. I mean, if there's any more concerns, they might get cleared as we code. So this is the the basic theme in most hash code problems. You'll be given some scenario, and you're asked to improve your score on that. So, Animesh, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll just also say a couple of things about the general strategy that we are going to come up with over the, I guess, 4 or 5 hours we have for hash code. I guess we have 4 hours, right? So in those 4 hours, you want to spend about the first 10 to 15 minutes reading the problem and coming up with a first-hand greedy approach. You want to spend like another 15 minutes trying to code up some basic graphs and plotting, and you want to, in those like till the 30th minute, come up with some basic idea of how you are going to code up your checker. So checkers and validators are going to be key. The one big leeway that this format gives you is that you are allowed to code on as large a machine as you want. So you can essentially run massive solvers on your own computer for hours, and you can run these on ADA. But the one thing you need is for the first 2 hours to go well, that you have a clear solution in mind for those places that you want to run these bigger solvers, so that in the next 2 hours, if you want, you can leave a big task running. Obviously, this is not going to be necessary for us this time. For the scores that we promise you, you are going to get them without any massive computation, but it may be useful in some cases, and particularly in one of the cases in this particular problem, you can boost over our scores using these solvers. So yeah, Garang, do you want to start sharing your screen here?
Yes.
And start coding?
Wait, we start with the EDA, right?
Let's start with let's start with EDA, right? Works.
Right.
So I guess now is a nice time to think what are the problems in our like what are the different aspects of the problem that we'll have a hard time
Just a
dealing
small,
with.
small interruption. What is the score and what is the solver and how do you boost your? Can you go
Okay.
over that?
Garang, do you want to actually look at the scorer function in utils first? Like just
Right.
show utils.
Vinit, but what is your question? Are you asking what the score is? Like, what are we trying to improve on?
No, I got that.
Mm-hmm.
But what? I'm kind of confused about the general idea.
Okay, the general idea here is different. It's like in usual code forces or your online judge OJ assignments, you are being asked to write
Wait,
a
1 second. What is a solver? I think that's my basic doubt. I got this and all that, but what is a solver?
Solver is the code you write, which takes the question as input, which is the H or V tag, like the alignment, comma, the list of tags, and outputs this list of indices, which would be the order in which you want to place them. A scorer is a program that takes your answer and the question and assigns you a score, and a validator is the function which checks that your score is correct. If Garang would like to show the solver, the scorer, and other things coded up.
right. Yeah. So the code is there, but I mean, basically, Srijan, I think your doubt is because you're not being asked to submit the code. You are being asked to submit the text file, the ordering. You have to write the code that outputs the ordering. So I will write a Python file that outputs the text file, and then I have to submit that text file. So you don't have to submit the code. So you can run your code any way you want. They ask for your code, but they won't actually run it. They just use it to ensure no plagiarism. But other than that, you want to submit the text file. So
Okay, I think I'm getting it.
yeah, the general idea is slightly different. So of course, like we understand it will take some time to get used to. I am the voice behind Prangik. I'm Gorang. So I am the one who was posting on Discord. Yeah. So anyway, so basically I'll show you this core function. So this is, as you can see right here, again, a good philosophy in hash code is to have a utils file which has all the common functions that you will generally need. So for example, you have the input files. So as you can see, there are 5 input files that we have in this contest. These will be shown on your dashboard. So you will have a dashboard on your screen and it will show you these 5 names. You can download them. I already have them downloaded here. So you can see I can even load it. So you can see this is the file that was being shown by Animesh on the PDF. You have 4, which is the number of photos. You have H. It is a horizontal photo with 3 tags, cat, beach and sun, and so on. So they give you a text file and they want a text file back. Anyway, you generally set a seed. I'm not sure if you're familiar with random number generation, but generally in hash code, you're going to need a lot of random number generation. And it is good that you set a seed to make sure that every time you run your program, the random numbers are the same. So what I mean by that is that, for example, when you first ran your code, it outputted random numbers like 10, 20, and then something like 4, then 100, and so on, right? Now, the next time you run your code, like when you run your Python code once again, it might output a different sequence. It might output 5, 13, 17, and so on, right? So you want this sequence to be the same every time. So this part ensures that the sequence remains the same every time. So if you're trying to debug your code, this will make it easier. Again, you have different things in different languages. In C, you can, for example, use srand. You might be familiar with it. So different things gone in different places. This is a very simple function that reads the input from a given file. Again, you like generally having
Garang,
such.
Just one comment here that you want to set your random seed for the first few runs when you're trying to debug so that your behavior does not keep changing while you are debugging your code or while you are testing out initially. But you want to have that flexibility of changing the random number seed when you're running, because Having the same set of random numbers will ensure that you have the same fortune, whereas if you have different random numbers, maybe you can get lucky sometimes.
Right. So that's why we have a sys.argv here. So sometimes if we want to change the seed, we can do that. Again, if you're not familiar with the syntax, don't worry. You can write everything we have done here in C. There's nothing special about Python. It just makes it a whole lot easier to do something useful in 4 hours. All right. So don't freak out on this like, oh my God, I don't know Python and what is this ternary? I don't know anything. Don't worry, you can do it in C. We need random numbers because we want to give some variation in our solution. As you'll see, the solution is usually not so straightforward that I can take the first node then the second node. If I have 100 nodes, I want to be able to say I will take the 75th node, then I might take the 36th node, then I might take the first node. I want to bring the randomness in. If take an example, if Google didn't want you to do randomness, then they would give you the file in such a way that if you take it in ascending order, like first to last, then you will get a very bad score. So you want to get that randomness in to make sure that like you're basically getting a decent score, not being fooled by the input file, right? To put it that way. We will show you randomness as we code it later. So anyway, this function just reads the input. You can write this in C. You all have been reading inputs in OJ, so you know how that works, right? And then this is a solution loader. Again, it's something we'll come across later, not relevant right now. This is the relevant part, score. You will always need this function in hash code. No matter what your problem statement is, you need a score function that takes your input file. So this file name is the input file and this is your solution. And this is the basic prototype. Don't look at the code, right? Don't look at the code, just read this. You have a function that takes the input file and takes the solution and gives you the score, like how good your solution is. So if I show you the leaderboard, these are the scores on these right side columns. Like these are the numbers that I was talking about, and these are the ones we have to optimize. So obviously, you need such a function that gives you the score. And here, as you can see, we have certain simple assertions to make sure that our solution is actually valid. That is what Animesh was talking about. You want to make sure that your solution is valid and you want to make sure that you're getting a good score. So these are the two parts here. Again, don't go by the specific line by line, just adopt the general philosophy here. Right. So then
could you explain how a solution could be invalid? I don't see how it could be invalid.
Of course, there could be a bug in your code, right? So
an example would be that you have used the same image more than once. You have clubbed a horizontal photo with a vertical photo or something other than
right.
that. You have not used all the photos or something of that sort.
Right.
Just to clarify, if the input file has two vertical images in a single slide, you cannot separate the two vertical images, right?
They have not set up the slides.
The input file does not have the slide. The input file just gives you the photos. So I'll show you the once again.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Okay, got it.
Right. It's okay. Don't worry. So yeah, I can understand there might be some confusion. So these are just the photos. So as you can see, two horizontal photos and two vertical photos. You have the freedom to choose the slides in whatever way you want. So don't worry about that. Anyway, then we have some other custom functions, and finally we have a submit function. Again, a very straightforward function. This will always be there in your hash code code. You will take a file, the input file and the solution, and output it to another file. So here you can see, you can eyeball it to understand that I am taking the solution and outputting it to a file. Again, very relevant. Like you will need to do this a lot of times to be able to submit quickly, and like there will be times in the last 2 hours when you're just frantically submitting. So you will need this function obviously to be able to output and submit. So again, you can write this in C. I'm reiterating multiple times. Don't worry about the Python part here. Like Python, if you look at this Python code, this is I would not say very easy to understand, but this is like pseudocode. You can try to eyeball it and get the idea that okay, there's a for loop, there is some plus equal to going on, something is going on here. You can eyeball it, and the code is all on GitHub. You don't need to take screenshots or anything. Like you can check it out after the meeting is over. Anyway, we've spent enough time on the basic utilities, and now we go to EDA. So yeah.
Just one more comment here is that when we are looking at the utils file, we need to have the solution load and the solution write methods, because for a lot of the time in the later hours, you will be taking good solutions that you have already found and trying to slowly improve on them using ideas called local search that we'll hopefully get to. But yeah.
Right. So anyway, so yeah, this will be there. Again, we are not guessing the answer. Like, we are not guessing in the strictest sense of guessing, but we are still using heuristics because we are not sure. So if we have, for example, let me give you a basic example. If you have 10 photos, like take the example of this problem itself, that if you have 10 photos and all of them have one tag, right? So there are 10 photos and all of them have one tag, and the one tag can be different. So something is about a beach, something is about the sun, and so on. So you don't know what is the correct answer. You're not guessing. Like, you had 100 photos. You originally had in the input file 100 photos, and you narrowed down your search. So you had a deterministic search, let's say, and you narrowed it down to 10 photos. But you have to take only one. So how do you take one? So you guess. That is the guess. So it's not a guess in the strictest sense of guessing. It's a very informed guess, a very reasonable guess that you can make so as to get your answer. And guessing using a random number, make sure that you don't fall into any trap. So for example, if the Google employees gave you an input that specifically has some pattern of photos that makes your score go very low, if you take them in the order that they have given, then you will miss out, right? So you want to have that heuristic part also. So that is what heuristic means. So scientific tukka, as Pratyaksh is saying. So yeah, something like of that sort. For now, we can take it that way and continue. Anyway, we get to the EDA now, which is a very important part of hash code, another very crucial component.
So let's start by planning, I guess, what things we need to learn about. And one of the things that we definitely always need to know is that can this problem be solved deterministically, which is how many nodes are there, how many tags are there, how large will it be to represent this entire thing, how large will it be to go through all the possible permutations. So I guess you can start by printing those things out, right?
What is a node?
Where is node written?
You just said node, right?
Okay, I guess I meant for a graph, but yeah, let's not. I'm sorry. Yeah, what I mean to say is that you want to figure out, like, if you have several permutations, each permutation, you can try out n number of permutations, right? So if the number of photos that you have is 10, then you can try out all possible 10 factorial permutations of this list of photos and figure out which ones are the best. So you can have deterministic algorithms working till n is equal to 10. And soon after that, this breaks down and stops working. So yeah, the first thing would be to figure out how many tags we have, how many images we have, how many tags per image we have, how many images is each tag found in, because I am thinking of each. So I may use this word at some point in time, is that I think of a single slide as a node, because you can think of it as a node in a graph or a node in a permutation or whatever. But yeah, not relevant right now. So Gaurang will hopefully have some.
Yeah, right now I'm just inputting basic, like, as you can see. So again, what we are doing right now is taking the input in its most raw form and like basically segregating the horizontal and the vertical photos. So nothing special going on here. One thing I must say, this is a Jupyter notebook and it helps us separate code into different blocks. So here you can see one block, then you can see another block. Again, as I said several times, don't worry about this. Like, this is to like make it easy for you to understand the code, so that you can, like, this is very easy to, somewhat easy to figure out that, okay, if the alignment is edge, push it into the horizontal list, otherwise put it into the vertical list. Don't try to code this on your own if you don't know Python. Get the idea, get the philosophy, and code it in C if you want to. Our point here is to show you that this can be done in 4 hours and get a good score, if that's somewhat relevant. So, right.
Yeah. So separating out the horizontal and the vertical images would be, I guess, a relevant thing for several of our problems, because we want to analyze our vertical images separately and figure out how to combine them. And we want to analyze our horizontal images separately or with the already combined vertical images and see how to arrange them. And these are two different parts of our problem. We'll also be trying to segment out the problem. Through this entire process of EDA, what we essentially want to do is segment our problem into several smaller parts. So right now we have this problem of minimizing simultaneously the maximum of the set left difference, intersection, and right difference. So one question that we definitely want to ask ourselves is, can we try to minimize one? Which one is the most important to minimize? Are all three equally important, or is it usually that one of them will be the biggest? So the overarching way of thinking about this is how to break down your entire clustered problem into several different subcomponents. And for this, we'll try to break down the three parts of the objective function apart. We'll be trying to break down the vertical images against the horizontal images, the two tasks of clustering and ordering. And we'll be trying to break down clusters of images themselves and see if we can get a hang of which images we want to work with. Like if in the 10,000 images, we figure out that these 1,000 belong together and those 1,000 belong together, we can try to reduce the size of our problem. So that will be at the back of our mind.
Yeah, we in EDA, we are basically, I'm just going to show you what we're doing in EDA. Yeah, just let me just wait. What was the input to this function again? Oh, wait, I'm calling the wrong function. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just gonna run this and show you what it looks like. So, yeah. So this is what EDA is like in the primitive sense. Exploratory data analysis. You are reading the input and analyzing it. So here you can see. Let me use a more bigger file. So this was the file A. Now let us plot it for B. So we'll get a better idea. Yeah. So this graph you can see here. Let me full screen it. Yeah. So as you can see in this graph, you have the x-axis, which is the tag, different tags, and on the, I hope I'm getting it correct, on the y-axis is the count. So as you can see, we have.
You have alignment versus count graph.
Wait, what?
You have what?
Oh, right. I'm plotting how many tags are there such that the number of tags is 1. I think that is what is being plotted, right? If I remember correctly.
It's tag frequency. So how many tags are there such that they appear only in one image, such that they appear in 2 images, such that they appear in 3 images, and so on.
Right. So basically what this means is
for something else, image C or something.
Yeah, I'll plot this for image C so that like the B file is bigger. So right, yeah. So Animesh, can you?
So this is the tags. Our score function is almost entirely dependent on the tags. And what a tag means is a relation between two different images. So the first thing we want to do is to figure out how strong these relations are and whether or not we can break apart the problem. And if you will look at these plots for image C, D, and E, you will notice that most of the tags appear only in one image, I guess, right? So these
basically
tags are not really relevant to us. Yeah. And then those that appear in 2 images are relevant. 3 images are going to get a little complicated because we can only like 2 people will be able to share it, and then the third guy will have to come right next to them. So 3 and 4, the higher the number of images a tag is shared in, the more complicated the problem gets. However, when we explored this plot for problem subpart B, and this is our first intuition on this problem, we noticed something sinister, that there are tags where you only see this guy once. You are tags where you only see the tag once, which is essentially an irrelevant tag. It only serves to increase the set difference and not to increase the set intersection. And then you have these significantly more, about 600,000 tags, which appear exactly in 2 images. And they serve to connect those 2 images, but they don't appear in a third image that you have any complex decisions of which images to use the tag in, if there are 3, like how to order them, etc. If you have a tag, you can put those 2 images together. So yeah, I guess now
Right.
it would be nice.
Basically, yeah, this graph, like the x-axis represents in how many images that tag appears, and the y-axis is the number of such tags. So as you can see in problem B, this is the fishy thing that's going on. All of the tags either belong to one image or they belong to 2 images. And like we know that we can exploit this later. We'll show you how to exploit this later, but for now remember that you must always look at the most basic thing. So that is what the relations, like tags connect images, right? So if you see, this was for problem B and this is for problem C. So you can see that here the situation is a bit more diverse. You might even say random or irrelevant, but the situation changes per question, so you have to be cautious of that. Again, yeah, I mean I like the input files are big, like really big. So okay, might not even load. It's going to be very big, like it's not even going to load fully in PyCharm. Like this is a heavy duty editor, but it won't load it. So you are going to rely on graphs to do most of the heavy lifting. We can also plot a simpler graph. So for example, a simpler graph would be to plot how many horizontal and how many vertical images there are, right? That would be one of the more basic plots, I would say. So again, we can do the similar thing. We can have again, don't go by the code. You, of course, now I wouldn't say you can do this in C. Like this is something, plotting is something unique to Python, easily done in Python. So don't expect that in C. But yeah, so we can also plot what kind of alignment is there, and this should work. So okay, right. So yeah, we are basically data crunching to get a feel inside of the data and develop a technique particular to that subtask. Perfect. So if we have subtask B, then we look at its data and we say, okay, this is the kind of data going on here. I might need something and then something else. So different kinds of data might be there, right? So in this particular data that you see, uh, hmm, wait, did I want to plot? I think I wanted bar plot or disk plot. Wait, this can get.
No, that's okay, right?
Okay, never mind.
That is
Anyway,
okay.
like
Your count plot is okay.
okay, never mind. So basically, as you can see, you have 500 vertical images and 500 horizontal images for problem C. And if I change this to problem B, um, here you will see that all the images are horizontal. For problem B, all images are horizontal. So H is 80,000. Again, don't go by the code, just you can count in C also. So all the images are 80,000. That means all are horizontal. So we might be able to develop techniques particularly to horizontal images. Similarly, if I remember correctly, all the images in last subtask are vertical. So all 80,000 images in subtask E are vertical. So then we will need some other techniques. So right, so this is the basic.
One request.
Hmm.
Can you just remove sns.countplot list where you have list frec values? Can you just replace that with alignment? Just write alignment there.
Okay, right. I was wondering what is going on.
Control.
Yeah. So right. Okay. Yeah. Now it shows the correct thing. I was wondering that. So anyway, let me show you on B so that it becomes more clear. Right, so you can see V is 500 and H is 500. Again, look, even I am not very familiar with all the graphing functions. What we usually do is just Google what we want to do and we find it on the first hit on Stack Overflow. So we just use that, like either you practice, like Animesh has a lot of practice on Seaborn and all. So we just rely on him for graphing. Again, you have 4 people in the team, right? Everyone does not need to do everything. So you can assign one person to do all the graphing, one person to write all the greedy codes, one person to write something else. So you have a bit of parallelization going on. So I don't generally handle the graphing part very well. So anyway, so yeah, this makes sense. We know what data there is in each problem. Anyways, do you want to go ahead with some other EDA as well?
Yeah. So another thing that we definitely want to try is to figure out which is relevant. Is the set difference relevant, or is the what do you call it? The overlap relevant, the intersection relevant. So we want to try to simulate this. Can you try to simulate this? Just pick two random images, I guess.
Mhm.
Or if you
Okay.
can
Oh,
pick all pairs.
I remember. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So basically, you want me to do something like,
Yeah.
we'll import random
Just range.
and yeah. So for 1,000 trials, yeah, just range in this case.
Pick two random
And
images. And try to.
I think, wait, did your file include set or did it not? Read input. Okay, it's already set. So in Python we can use set to easily take set difference and all. So I'll show you that. So T1 is tags I1 and T2 is tags I2. Again, as you can see in PyCharm, you're already getting these hints on the right hand side, which is pretty nice, and it makes coding a lot easier. So anyway, so tags even E2, like right now we want the diff. So T1 minus T2. This is a set difference, by the way.
Okay, so let's do a bit of optimization here. Let's just first take the intersection.
Okay.
T1 and so this is the intersection, and the left difference would be T1 minus intersection.
T1. Oh, right. Sorry.
Just
no, but
find the length, right? Just find the length. Just intersection is len T1 and T2.
Right.
And then you can compute left difference is length of T1 minus intersection. LDiff and RDiff are. Do you have the brackets wrong? Yeah, fine. That's okay. This is very slow.
Now what? Do I need three lists, right? Or no? We are going to do count plot, right, on this?
Right. Also,
right. So I should. Yeah. So
I
should
guess
I put
because
this?
we have. Go on.
Go on.
I was just asking that we are 44 minutes in, and if you want to cover like significant material, should we switch to some pre-prepared material?
This is the last part. So I just want to get the plot done.
Yeah. Yeah, I meant len T1 minus intersection, right? But yeah, it doesn't really matter because we're just doing 1,000 trials. So yeah.
Yeah, so as you can see, we have some other stats. So as you can see in this particular problem, there is really no intersection going on here. And even the left differences and right differences are mostly uniform.
Large numbers, right? So the left difference and the right difference are always significantly. The smallest value of left difference is 4, and right difference similarly, something like that. And you notice that your intersection is between size 0, 1, 2, 3. It never goes to 4. And this directly provides you with a lot of leverage that you just don't need to care about the left difference and the right difference, because left and right differences are always more than the set intersection. So the problem is just maximize the set intersection, and you are done. Obviously, this will change from subpart to subpart. In subpart D, if you plot this, you will see a more homogeneous split, which is one of the reasons why you will find subpart D on Kaggle and being a very hard problem, as opposed to subpart C, which is directly reducible to maximize set intersection. or subpart B, which has other weird properties. Same with E.
Right.
C,
So
B, C, and
yeah, I guess. So again, if
What are
there's
the
any
X and Y axis here?
so this is a count plot, and on the x-axis is the particular value, and on the y-axis is how many times it appears. So you can think of it as value versus frequency of that value. That is the count plot, right? You are counting how many times each value appears. So as you can see in this particular graph, the intersection of two tags is 0, all like in 250 different cases. Again, we only took 1000 trials. Like we can take more trials to let's say get a clearer graph, but again you'll get the almost the same picture. As you can see, it did not really change. So in this particular case, of the 10,000 trials, around 2500 trials give us pairs of images which have no intersection, and around 3000 give us one intersection. So you can say that 30% of the time you will have one intersection, and more than that, like 20% of time two intersection, and so on. So you get a general idea of what your data is, right? So you can
Oh, sorry, you are saying in 2500 trials, no consecutive pair of images has any intersection. That's what
these
you're
are
saying.
not consecutive. These are just some random, like here you can see I'm just randomly picking two images, I1, I2, not necessarily consecutive. And I'm doing 10,000 trials, out of which
Okay,
2500
got it.
landed up in no intersection range, right? So basically this is EDA is the second step, will help us get an idea of what our data is. Anyway, we'll get to coding now, because yeah, we are
Great. So let's plan this that in the next about 20 to 30 minutes, let's try to get or less than 20 or so. Let's try to get a fast greedy up, because we have already gotten the idea that now our problem has reduced from trying to minimize all of set intersection and difference and stuff to just trying to maximize set intersection, right? I hope everyone gets this. So
yeah, like even if you don't find anything useful in the EDA, one good thing is to just write some solution up and see how well it performs. So yeah, like but yeah, the general point is that we notice in the EDA that certain properties hold. So in this case, we only need to focus on the set difference. So like we need to
set
focus our attention there. Set intersection, right? Sorry. So yeah. So now we just start solving the question. So
yeah. So we are trying to code up a initial greedy approach, and we'll always try to start off with a greedy approach, which tries to go over the entire data set and attempts to maximize the immediate score that you are going to get. So it starts from any random photo and tries to find another photo which has maximum intersection with it. Right. So given 80,000 initial photos, how much time each iteration of your algorithm is going to take to find the next best photo? Obviously, you'll have to look through all the 80,000 photos to compute the intersection. So it is going to be 80,000 slow steps. And you are going to have to do this for all the 80,000 slides. So that's 80,000 squared times some set intersection time that you are going to be spending. So that's pretty slow. We are not going to be able to do that. And here is where our random numbers come in, that you just try to pick at random 100 images and try to find the best out of those. So you are praying that out of every 100 images, you will find some reasonably good image, and you are going to try to chain these images together. So 100 or 1000 or whatever, depending on the time you have. Initially, we start off with small numbers so that we can get a quick estimate up and running. So yeah, let's take a look at what Gaurang is doing. Gaurang is trying to separate out the horizontal and the vertical images. And once he has separated out the horizontal and vertical, this is the part of combining. So I guess we'll see more EDA when we finally look at the GitHub files. But the general idea is that you want to try to maximize the set intersection of these pairs as well. You want to maximize when you have two different photos, you want to find the most different vertical photos to combine together in the same image, so that you have the maximally diverse slide. And then when you put that slide next to any other slide, they have a high intersection, a better chance of having a high intersection. Yeah. Gaurang has sorted out his vertical and horizontal images. Now he is trying to work purely with the horizontal images. He has set up a total pairs, which will be the number of slides that you are going to put up. He randomly chose the first photo out of the vertical photos, and he removed it from the remaining list of photos. So vertical and horizontal will both be the remaining list of photos he has to work with.
Yeah, again, we are doing this live just to get the point across that it's very easy to get a basic score on the problem. So like this is a beginner session, so we don't expect you to come up with the best solution in 4 hours, but we want you to come up with something that you can submit in the contest. Like if we want one thing for you guys, then it is that you should be able to submit something in the contest. Don't go out empty handed. Participate and submit. So as you can see, like I barely started and I'm halfway through my code. So yeah, like basically I'm just trying to, I've taken the first random photo and then I'm yeah, Animesh, you can explain.
Yeah. So Gaurang has started off with a random photo, and then we had already written this thing called overlap size in utils. So another thing that you want to do in utils is not only do you want to write your overall scorer function, but you want to write smaller scorers, which is essentially saying that how do you maximize the score of two vertical images. Now, score is not defined for two vertical images. So you can come up with your own sense of score, which is like saying that I want to just maximize the union, the size of the set union of these two images. And this is the most reasonable primitive guess anyone can make for how good two vertical images go together. Yeah, so we are going to try to maximize over this score, and Gaurang will most probably pick up a trial number of random photos and try to maximize amongst those 100 randomized guesses. So he maintains the best score and the chosen photo, and after he iterates over the 1,000 trials, he finds whatever best was in those 1,000, and he removes it from the list of pending photos and appends the first photo and the chosen best photo together to make one slide. So this is the combination step. So we have done some sort of greedy combination. And the second thing we are going to do, I guess, is some form of greedy sorting. Now, please note that you may not be fully satisfied by the fact that we want to go with these greedies, and hopefully we'll be giving some more justification as far as EDA goes later down the line. But right now, this seems to be the naivest approach that you can come up with, that you just choose 100 values and come up with the best one out of them just because you cannot search through all 1,000. So you came up with a bad greedy, and then you are picking a subset out of it, and somehow it still works. So anyways, the second part is up now, the arranging part. Again, once he has paired up all the photos, Gaurang has appended them to a slides array, which has all of the horizontal photos, and then he has appended all the pairs of vertical photos he has formed in the first step. Then you choose a random initial photo to start as the first slide and plug it into your solution. And then you know how many total slides you want to make, because that's the total number of slides you have available. For each of the previous slides, he'll pick one random slide and he'll try to keep finding a trial number of 1,000 random future slides that he wants to guess on. And once he has iterated through those 1,000 random slides, he'll do the exact same thing that we just did in the first part, which is maintain a best slide and a best score, and whichever slide gives you the best score, you just go with it.
Yeah, so this is the heuristics that we were talking about earlier. We are not sure which slide to pick. Like we are reasonably confident that any slide should give a best score. So we just pick some random slide. I forgot to set the seed. Anyway, so I take the slide and now I just need to append it to my solution dot append best slide, and then I need to remove it from my existing slides. Right. So basically there were two parts to this solution, if you couldn't tell. The first part was pairing the vertical photos. The vertical photos don't go alone, so you need to find a pair for them. So that is what I was doing in the first part. Now once I'm done with that, I want to arrange the slides. So now I have paired the vertical photos. I have separately have the horizontal photos, and then I can stitch them together in a what do you call it? The slideshow, right? So the slideshow, this utils.slide score gives you the score as we discussed earlier, the minimum of the left difference, right difference, and the intersection. So like you can go there and check that it is literally doing this. But like we can just treat it as a black box and consider it there. And then we're just greedily optimizing at every intersection, and then I'm just going to submit for my particular file name and my particular solution. File name. Yeah.
I think you need to call your file number utils input file. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that is all. Like that is literally the first.
One more thing. Can you just print the score for the file? Just go to the
Oh.
bottom and just print the score.
Where will I find it? Does this return?
Utils.score. No, utils.score. Utils.score. Utils.score is
Okay. Right. So score is. Right, so I have written this, I can run this. Wait, which problem did I set it on? Line 57. Yeah, there's always going to be something wrong. In this, I'm guessing. Wait, let us first run it on a simpler problem, which is the first input, just to make sure that like our solution runs on the base case. Yeah, so there seems to be some mistake I made. Obviously, there is always going to be some mistake. So I can show you how to.
You have a mistake?
What?
I cannot see the error.
Yeah, it's on line 57. I have an empty list. I don't know why.
Oh, because I think you have one extra iteration or something. Like you go to range total slides. Can you just get rid of it?
Oh,
and
right.
Slides is not empty.
Right. I already took one slide, so I don't need to iterate more. Right. So as you can see, it ran pretty quickly, and score on A example is 2. I can run this on a different file. Let us run it on input C. I expect it to finish quickly. Yeah. So this is the score we get, 1439. So I can show you the score like the one you have on the what was it? Hashcode tutorial. Yeah, so the official, like the solutions we obtained when we were practicing on C is 1533, and like with a very simple greedy you got 1439. Again, like this is a very small input file. Like if you count the number of lines in the C file, it's literally 1001. So there are only 1000 photos, but any other file has a lot more photos. So the difference is going to grow bigger. I can show you. So for example, if you have, wait, why am I opening this here? So for if you have like the fourth input, let's say, again, it's going to give a very bad score, but that's okay. Like it will
4
take.
will get a decent score because
4 will
has
get
a lot of other. But just try 2 problems apart B.
Right. Yeah, it will take some time to run. Again, another thing that you need to get used to in Hashcode is your code taking time to run. So like it will take if it takes 5 minutes or 10 minutes to run, it's okay. Like you should first try it down on the smaller sets like problem C or problem A, and then once you're sure it's okay, you can just run it here. Right now I'm just going to like reduce the number of trials.
Yeah, no, one second. Can you just this seems like an opportune time to introduce TQDM. So can you just
Right. So what we'll do is like, again, see, all these things are not necessary to participate in Hashcode or necessary to even like do anything, but they make your life a whole lot easier. So TQDM is one such thing, and you'll see it instantly in effect. So what I just did, I just integrated it in my code, and this is what it does. It shows you a live progress bar, and it also shows you the rate at which your code is running. So you can see it's roughly 900 iterations per second, and it also shows you that it's going to take about 30 more seconds to complete. And it says that it has 40,000 iterations, of which roughly 20k are now completed. So this is a pretty cool thing. Again, this is only the first for loop. We actually have 2 for loops. So this is, yeah, it's going to take another 30 seconds. Again, as I said, if it takes a couple of minutes to run, it's okay. Like, you just need to make a submission. The point in first, like when your first attempt, you're not maybe even going to ace the contest, but you can at least try to attempt, right? So this is what we are demonstrating with our first technique, which is the simple greedy. And yeah, it's almost done running, so we'll just wait for it. Right.
This is
So-
particular, yeah.
So here you can see on problem E, we get a score of 282,000. And if we compare it to the score we have on our GitHub repo, it's 317K. So there is not a very big difference. Like it's a difference of 30K. And like you have to realize that like this is a pretty big deal. Like if you can, like it took me less than 30 minutes to code this up. Like if with a little practice, you can also code it in maybe 1 hour or maybe 2 hours, but you have a total of 4 hours in the contest, right? So if you have a say if you have a 80 line code excluding the utilities, but the utilities, like they are straightforward. You just need to read the file, output the file, and get the score. So if you have 80 line solution, which is a simple gradient, gets you a decent score, then you should try it out, right? Again, this is not close to the best solution. On E, the best solution is roughly 561K plus, but that is something even grandmasters couldn't manage on Codeforces. So this is the best score we could get in our online greedy approach, and with a greedy graph approach, you're getting 280. So not a not a compromise. Like this is a very good trade-off for time taken to code versus the score obtained. Again, it's all very clean code. Like there's no part in this code that you can point at and say this is particularly innovative or particularly new. It's pretty rudimentary, pretty systematic. Like you can apply this on literally any other problem statement, not just in this particular problem statement. But the point is, for your first hash code contest, it will get you a very good score. So that is what I'm trying to emphasize here. Like that
Right,
is
and I'll just share a couple of anecdotes here. That the first time we did this, and we exactly did this with slightly more number of trials, it ended us up with a global rank of somewhere near 700 something, and a national rank of 50. And if you are a little bit smarter about this, if you look at our GitHub notebook, you can definitely end up with something close to a national rank of 10 and a world rank of 363, I guess, for our GitHub repo. So you get really good scores just out of these greedies. You will note that particularly if you can run this Golang for B, you will notice that this is almost completely trash. Like,
yeah, and just reduce the number of trials because
yeah, that's okay. So in any case, like we have tried to run this up to 1,000 trials for B, and this does not work. Like our score on B is 200,000 plus, and the score that this got was somewhere near 1,500. And I hope that the same happens right now, but let's see.
no, the same will happen. So another thing to note here is that by changing the random seed, you're not going to get a very drastic improvement. So don't sit there in hash code and like change your random seed and keep trying something. So this is a very poor. So again, this is a very simple solution. It gets a good score on some files, does not get a good score on other files. So here you can see a score of 144, which is like 1,000 times lesser than what the best score is. So like this is not the best score. The best score we got in like maybe 4 hours, and other people can get like better practice, get more scores. So yeah, I mean the point here is simple. Don't like if like this suggests us that now changing the random seed won't work. We need to come up with a systematic improvement to our algorithm. So yeah,
I think
maybe
now
we can
is
look
a
at
good time to switch to our actual code. and try to show what EDA is and how do we approach this problem further. Because I hope
Right.
we'll not be spending a lot of time more. Like, let's try to wrap
Right.
up in 30 or so.
So do I go to the the
Ah.
original code or
No, can you?
yeah?
You have the repo cloned in your.
Right. Yeah, I'll just open it. So yeah, I'll show you guys how to like what other approaches are there. So one particularly interesting approach is online greedy. Again, now I will not code because I have shown you that we can code a 80 line solution in 30 minutes. So like we can do this again for another code, but that's not the point. Now we have spent 1 hour. Now we want to look at different solutions. So this approach in particular is pretty interesting. It does not get you a very good boost in the score, but it gives you a decent boost in the score. So this here is an online greedy. What this basically means is it's a fancy term, but what this basically means is that if we look at the original graph code, where is it? Right, this is the original graph, right? So we were first separating horizontal and vertical. This is the original code, by the way. This is not what I wrote right now. As you can see, the original was also less than 60 lines and a bit more clean. But yeah, the same thing. Anyway, so what we were first doing was we were first matching the vertical images, combining the vertical images, and then once we were done with that, we were arranging the slides, right? So if you had 6 vertical images, then you combine them to make 3 slides, and now you have 3 slides, and now you want to arrange them. So these tasks were being done separately, but now in online greedy, we want to do them in parallel, together, simultaneously. What this means is that, yeah, so let's just jump right into it. Again, all the same stuff is there. You have TQDM in a slightly different way. Again, you can check this out on GitHub later. First, listen to us explaining it, and then read it on your own. And if you don't get it, like just treat it as pseudocode and write it in C or C++. So that is there. So anyway, again, the same thing. While we have vertical images or we have horizontal images, we take a previous slide if it exists, and then we try to do two things. So I'll just fold the code so you can see the 4 parts to this while loop. So now you can see the entire function is in one screen, and in the first part of this function, I'm selecting a vertical image slide. In the second part of this function, I'm selecting a horizontal image, and in the third part, I'm choosing one of them to act as my next slide. Does that make sense? Right? We are choosing either 2 vertical images or a single horizontal image, and updating the next slide based on whichever one of them gives me a better score. As you remember from our previous discussion, the scores are only dependent on the consecutive images, right? So we don't need to worry what the second last slide was. So if this is our previous slide, I don't need to worry what my previous slide was. That is irrelevant to our score, right? We only need to worry about the previous slide. So let us dive into the first part, which is how to select 2 vertical images for a slide. And this is exactly the same as what we did in the previous code. Like you can just even copy paste, it might work. And what we are doing here is we are saying that I'm going to choose, so I'm going to try 100 times, and 100 times I'm going to try to combine 2 vertical images, right? So let's say that I had 1,000 vertical images. So I have 1,000 vertical images, and 100 times I will try to take 2 random images out of that, make a pair, get a score, and of these 100 runs, I'll take the best scoring run. So if that makes some sense, right? We have, let's say, 1,000 images, and we have 100 trials. So what do you say when you roll a dice, right? So you roll it 100 times, and then you say that, okay, I want to find the best score I get after I roll the dice 100 times. So that is what we are doing here. We have a sample space that is pretty big, right? We can have, if we have 1,000 images, we have NC2 pairs, and we obviously cannot check all the pairs. So we're just going to rely on random numbers and pick 100 such trials of random pairs, and then calculate their score, and whichever gives the best score, we're going to take that. I hope that makes some sense, right? We are just rolling a dice, if you might take it that way. We're just rolling a dice and taking the best roll of the dice that we can get, and then we take that, then that gives us our best slide using 2 vertical images. We are going to do a similar thing for horizontal images, but in the case of horizontal images, we're just going to loop over all the horizontal images because there are only like 1,000 of them. sorry, 40,000 of them, but it's still like it runs within very fast, so not an issue. So it is going to take all the horizontal images and pick the best. So now when we come to the final part, we have either a 2V slide or a 1H slide, right? One horizontal slide or two vertical slide, and then we pick whichever is the best. So as you can see, the arranging and the selection part is taking together simultaneously. We are choosing a vertical image right here, and we're also arranging it live. In the previous code, you are selecting and arranging separately. So this gives a better boost on the score. I'm not going to run it again because it takes 5 minutes to run. But like this is the online greedy, it gives us 317K on E again and again. Not a very big code. In fact, a very short, like as short as the okay, slightly longer than the previous code, but still not very big, but it gets a very good score. So the point being repeatedly driven home here is that unless you want to get like a top 10 rank or something, you don't really need some really like brain exploding innovation going on here. Just keep applying heuristics, and that comes through practice, and that comes through observations, that comes through EDA, which we showed you. We showed you different graphs. So this is the original EDA repo. You can find this code on our GitHub, and you can see all the different EDAs that we did, and this gives
Let's
us an
actually
insight
take a
into
minute to explain
right.
some things here, because I just actually want to get to the DFS part.
Right.
And
Yeah. I'm
right.
just about to. I'm
Yeah.
about to end. So yeah. So as you can see, yeah. So we just take and yeah, that's all. So this was a very short code. The key facts that we want to tie back in are the random number generation, like heuristically, like randomly just choosing two pairs and just making something work, and the importance of TQDM or something of that sort. You can also use counters if you're not a fan of TQDM. You can say something like C is equal to 0, and you can say something like if C mod 250 is equal to 0, right? Every 250th iteration, print a dash, and C plus is equal to 1. So what this will do is every 250th iteration, it will print a dash, and like you can get a visual understanding of how far your code has run, and you know the total number of iterations, so you can estimate okay how much time is left. So these are the little tricks you can do, but again TQDM is far superior. And yeah, really urge you to switch to Python and for like look at any basic resource, and this is all just like Googleable. You can Google TQDM, you can Google Seaborn and all that. Anyway, let's get to the EDA for B, I guess.
Yeah, so I guess another part of the overarching philosophy, the reason why we tried out online grading is because throughout our EDA, we were unable to decouple the horizontal images and the vertical images from each other. The tasks of combining two images was never decoupled from the task of arranging the images. Therefore, it's always wise that if you did not explicitly manage to show that these are relatively independent tasks, you should try to do them together. So finally, we'll take a look at trying to analyze the specific structure of the problem B, and we'll take a little bit of a look at other problems. So in our approach, we start by taking a look at the tags. We notice that each tag is either appearing in 0 or 1 images. Now, this leads to a obvious
one or two images.
Sorry, 1 or 2 images. Yeah. So this leads to an obvious question that how many so say for example, one tag is in 2 images. So these 2 images can be called neighbors of each other, right? If you think of them as a graph, these 2 images would be joined by an edge. So the first question is,
let's take an example. So if we, like you know that all the tags either occur in 2 images or 1 image, and you can ignore let's ignore the tags that occur only in 1 image for now, and let us take a tag, for example, beach, and let's say that this tag beach occurs in 2 images, the first image and the second image, and these are the only 2 images in which it appears. That's what this graph shows. The blue graph, the blue part is the number of tags that appear in 2 images. So you can consider that okay, this beach tag appears on these 2 images, so it can be seen as connecting those 2 images as an edge. So you can consider this as a graph of images, and you have 80,000 images, so you have 80,000 nodes in your graph, and some of those images will be connected by an edge. Which images? Those images which share a tag, and we know that like you can also say that in other problems the tags are also being shared, right? Some tag might occur 3 times, 4 times, or 5 times, but in this problem we have tags that occur only in 2 images, so we can apply very specific like targeted approaches to this problem. So yeah, Animesh.
Yeah. So now the relevant questions we want to ask is that this is what we know, that one tag is shared by 2 images. But the question is, how many tags do 2 images share? Like whenever you do the forward problem, you should always try to compute the inverse plot. And how many other images does one image share its tags with? And we are going to try to answer these 2 questions. So this is how many, this is, I guess, number of tags in the image. So each
Right,
image
this is
has
some,
this
yeah.
many tags. So this
Yeah,
is
this is a
slightly
simple
different.
count plot of the, I think, the input itself, right?
Yeah.
This is
So
a
this is
standard
not
count plot,
really.
so don't get distracted by this. Yeah, this, I think this is what we are looking for, right?
Yeah, this is the number of this is the basically the number of tags that are shared by 2 images. Now we expected this to be a count plot. We expected that there would be some pair of images which will share
Like
no
we
tags,
expect it
some
to
pair
be
of
something
images.
like this. We expect some diversity in the output, but when you see some graph like this, there is something fishy.
Yeah, so if you notice that there are a large number of edges, like pairs of images, which don't share anything. And then there are a lot of images which share exactly 3 tags, no more, no less. There are no pairs of images which share 2 tags or 4 tags or anything else. So this pair of images with 2 tags actually gives us a very nice graph structure, that there are people who are joined to each other, who want to come near each other. And then there are people who just don't care about each other. And the degree of caring, or the intersection of the 2 sets, is consistently 3. So we can call it an unweighted graph. And here we are trying to starting to have our insights, that we have been phrased a problem which is in the form of an unweighted graph, and we want to find that traversal of the entire graph. So for those who are aware of the terminology, it's called a Hamiltonian path. But we are trying to find that path through the graph. Let me just define the what's known as the traveling salesman problem once. So the idea is that there is a salesman who wants to visit all the states of the country. So there are, I guess, 29 states, and you want to go through all of them. You want to visit each single state once and try to sell in that state. You do not want to come back to the same state twice, and you want to visit all the states in some random order. Now you are given plane tickets from state 1 to state 2 for all pairs of state. So from Jharkhand to Hyderabad, Hyderabad to Bangalore, Jharkhand to Bangalore, you are given these values. So it may be wiser for you to say, for example, go from Jharkhand to Hyderabad and then Hyderabad to Bangalore, than to go from Jharkhand to Bangalore and then Bangalore to Hyderabad. Because maybe the Jharkhand to Bangalore ticket is more expensive than the Jharkhand to Hyderabad ticket, and the Hyderabad Bangalore tickets are the same price. So this, and the touring of the entire country is called a Hamiltonian cycle. And the problem of how to travel the entire country while visiting each of the states only once is called a traveling salesman problem. And what you want to do is you want to minimize the cost of the edges. So what we notice here, and what a lot of the stronger people actually notice, is that you can phrase this problem by saying that the cost of going from you to any of the people who share a tag with you is obviously 0, because you like them, you have an intersection of 3 with them, you'll get 3 points from it. However, the cost of going to some tag which some image that does not share a tag with you, basically breaking the path, has a very high cost. Let's call that a cost of 10 or 100 or million. Doesn't really matter, because our cost of our friends is 0. So cost of reaching a
Basically,
third party
let me
is.
just like draw it out.
Yeah.
So like you have some node here, and then basically what the graph structure is, that all the nodes have a weight of, like, either the edge has a weight of 3, or there is no edge between them at all, like they don't share any tag at all. So like you can consider them, all the edges, to be of the same weight. Like you can just even call it a weight of 1. And now you want to find a way to arrange all these images in a slideshow. So that, and basically when we talk about a slideshow, what do we mean? we mean that, okay, you have, there was another observation in B that all the images were horizontal. So that means there is no worry about having to pair vertical images. Like if you have that in mind, you can drop it, because in B, all the images are horizontal. So you just need to pick images successively that have some tag intersection going on, right? So that is the graph formulation that we have. So now in traveling salesman, basically you're trying to visit all the cities and minimize or maximize the cost, whatever you may call it, right? So we note that in our problem it is always optimal to visit all the images, right? It is never optimal to drop some image, right? You can always take an image and put it at the end to get at least some improvement in the score. It does not have to be a lot. So we want to visit all the nodes, we don't want to drop any particular node. And yeah, and we want to traverse this through a graph. So these are the different edges. As you can see, this is the image 1, this is an image 2, and this is an image 3. So you may ask how to notice the graph structure. That happened through the EDA. Now how to construct the graph structure, that you can do through code, right? Just iterate through all the pairs of images, and or the other way around is look at the tag lists. So take a tag, let's say take a tag A, and find out which photos it appears in. So you will notice that it appears in only 2 photos, this and this. So you can just take that as the edge, and that way you can also construct the graph. Now finally you want to figure out how to actually do any kind of solving on this graph, how to figure out some ordering on this graph. So yeah, Animesh, what is the ordering we are trying to get to here?
Yeah, so what we want to do is essentially try to find, and it's okay if you don't find the traveling salesman phrasing of the problem. It's enough to notice that there is a graph. And all we want to find is, can you make a couple of connected components, make a cycle or something?
Great, there is a cycle. Let's make another
Couple of cycles. Yeah. So now what you want to do is to find the minimum number of paths. Essentially, you want to traverse all the nodes, but you want to find the minimum number of paths. So can you start by taking one big path from like the entire outer circuit of this? No, don't come back. Don't come back. Don't come back.
Right. We don't need to. We don't have to come back. Actually, it's not a
And
cycle.
I would like it if you would have some other nodes connected in the inside the cycle somewhere in the middle.
Like this.
Yeah, exactly. Make a couple of nodes here and there. You can.
Right.
So that's a separate path, right?
Right.
You will have to break. Like that's
We'll
not
have
a
to break.
part of the same
Right.
path.
Right. We're going to have break. So this would be a different cycle. Let's color it in a different color. So there are going to be 2 paths, right? That's what you're trying to say.
And yeah, there will be a third path for the other triangle.
Right.
So there are going to be 3 paths. And what we want to do is we want to minimize the number of paths. And there are a lot of smart approaches to do this. One approach is called
Basically, why do we want to reduce the breaks? Is because each such break costs us our score. Because remember that when you break, you're effectively saying that my intersection is 0. So when your intersection is 0, your score automatically becomes 0. So you don't want that to happen. You want to have at least some intersection going on, so that you're getting a positive score every time. Every time there's a break, you are saying my score is 0, I want to start afresh. That's not something you want to happen. If you have a big giant loop, you're going to get a much better score. Right.
So yeah, and what is the human way of approaching these loops? You want to just find the longest paths. And it's okay to try to just find a really long path, as long as you can keep going, just keep going and wrap up all of those vertices and then break and then come back and then start from somewhere else and keep on doing this. This is the naivest way of approaching this problem. I hope that's okay. And for this, let's come to our solver in our official code.
Right. So it was solve graph, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So if you'll notice, let's start at the start. It's the same thing as always. What we do over here. And let's start at the start. The first thing we do is convert this problem to a graph. So we notice who are the people who share a tag, intersecting tag. And then we assure ourselves that the pair of images that the tag comes in is indeed a pair. all the basic stuff that we already did. And we construct our adjacency list out of it by appending the other guy in the pair to both of our adjacency lists. The exact thing you do for any normal graph, and if you are doing
Like
good
we are
forces or
just
anything.
we are just treating this as a you will notice we just went from a photo slideshow to an undirected graph in no time. This is the power of EDA. You look at the EDA and you say, oh, I know what this problem looks like. We have solved it before. It's a graph. And now I'm solving a graph. I don't know what a slideshow is. I don't know what a slideshow is. It's just a regular graph. So at this point, when you return adjacency, like you're done. I don't care about the graph. I don't care about the slideshow anymore. I think that's right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And the nice way of finding long paths or finding diameters is to do a DFS. But sadly, I could not really make a DFS work here because DFSs are essentially hard to do on big graphs. You have to explore all of the nodes, and remember that you'll only get one path from this, and the paths may not be long. So just trying to find one path is actually expensive. It's of the order of n, which is near 80,000, and you want to repeat this process several times for all of the paths. So it's going to be really expensive. Now, the correct choice would be to do some depth limited search, but all I do is just go for one random node. Just find a random child and go into it, then again find a random child and so on. That's above in DFS, one function above. Yeah, that is DFS. So again, a very small function. You just get all of the adjacency, like everyone in your adjacency was not being visible. Might also be because you are passing adjacency as an argument.
Yeah, it passes by
Python
reference.
passes by reference. Yeah.
Actually, Animesh, can
Python
you just
always
draw the function, your function code, so that like people can see what happens. Like let's say start here. Then what does happen? So I started node number 1.
Yeah. So it looks at all of the 3 children,
Three children.
2, 3, and 4, and it randomly picks one child. Let's call it 2.
Okay.
Let's
So
go to
it
2.
goes to 2. Okay.
Yeah. Now again, it tries to find a child, and let's say it goes to 3.
There's only one child, so it
And
goes there.
again finds another child, goes down, follows the red path basically. Randomly keeps on going down, keeps on following paths. However, once it's at the last child, it has
Like,
only one person in its adjacency.
Right.
One
It's
thing
a
to
dead.
do is mark everyone as used always. So also one sec, just answering Pratik Sani's question. Like Python is implemented as a bunch of PyObject pointers in C++. So everything is a reference in Python unless you explicitly copy.copy or copy.deepcopy, which are 2 elements in the Python standard library. So anything other than that is a pointer in C++.
Right. So basically, we are just randomly doing a random DFS effectively, and every time we hit a dead end, we are like, oh boy, let's start all over again. So just keep doing this, and that's all the code is really trying to do. And I think, and again, if you look at the code, it's not very long. One theme that we're recurring seeing here is TQDM, is random numbers, and is a lot of approaches to how to think about the problem using EDA, and just solve it using some particular greedy approach, and a short code, of course, like not a very big code in our solutions. Again, these solutions don't win you the contest, but they get you a very good score on the contest that you can use as a benchmark for your next year attempt. Like when you try it again next time, you'll be like, okay, I scored so much next previous time, so now I should be able to do better. It will give you a lot more motivation to keep improving. So anyway, like yeah, I think anyways that's what you were saying, right? Regarding
Right, exactly.
Right. So
So
we
we
are
just find a child, we go to the child,
This
and we
is-
add that to the list.
right. This is the part that marks it as used, and then you have choices, and then actually you could just there were other ways. I mean, you could write this code in a whole different lot of ways, but that's not the point. And
Yeah,
then
the
you
problem is that if you try to recurse, Python runs out of the recursion depth.
all right. Yeah. So this is an iterative DFS, I guess. So anyway, so yeah, we have like small code and it runs, and I think this is the score that it gets on B, right? So
Yeah,
so
so the last part is just that you do a DFS, you do another DFS from the same node after marking the original DFS as used. You combine both the parts in reverse. So you reverse the first part, combine the whole thing to get sort of the thing that looks like a tree diameter. And finally, you just return this path, greedily choose this path out, put them in a line, and then go to the next guy. So this is a very bad way of solving a traveling salesman problem.
Right. You can try to actually get a TSP solver to work, but like basically the problem with such large graphs is that they don't fit in memory. So a lot of solvers just time out or run out of memory and other stuff. Because if you look at it, it's an 80,000 node graph, and the number of edges is a lot. Like I think there were 200,000 pairs. So 200,000 pairs graphs, and then you have to solve TSP on that. It's not super efficient. So yeah, so this is a very crude, like this is the crudest way you can come up with in less than 4 hours, and this is done in less than 4 hours. Like I know that, like, so, and it gets a decent score. So overall, this is the final score based on the three approaches. We did a greedy graph, we did online greedy, and we did graph DFS. And all the codes are short, use random heuristics, TQDM, and just like the aim is to work out the EDA first, try to think on paper, and like implement the code. We have already thought it out on paper, so what we're just doing right now is just walking you through the code, because like we just already did all the things on paper anyway. So this is something that this is the recurring theme, and this gets you a good score. So with this much score, you can get a rank of 363 in the real contest. Like 363 is somewhere here. This is 894, this is 893. So yeah, and this was all done in like around like very short amount of time. So like, no, this is not our performance. Like this, we did this just in just for this session. We just came up with all these approaches so that we could like show you guys that simple code, effective thought process, and EDA gets the job done. No need to get super fancy with TSP and everything. This like, yeah, of course we read the blocks and all that, but like that's the point. Once like we're just doing the hard work for you. Like if you have if enough practice, you should be able to come up with these things on your own. So particularly like this graph DFS, like that solves the TSP problem crudely, is something you will not find anywhere. Like it's such a bad way to solve TSP but it still gets the job done, right? So this you won't find anywhere. This greedy graph is the most primitive approach that gets the job done. You won't find this anywhere. Similarly, online greedy is a very small variation on this greedy part. So again, these things are not very hard to come up with. They of course require practice, but that's true for even a general Codeforces problem. So yeah, that's of course true. But yeah.
Finally, answer a few questions, and can you go to C, EDA for C? And till then, I'll say for A. Kishore Kumar, as far as these accounts go of solvers, like EDA tools, I know that Tableau is a tool. I have never used Power BI or something. But Tableau and other tools just don't work because your data can be extremely weird. And if you look at the 2020 problem, the library thingy, almost no tool will work, and it's actually really hard to even come up with a Seaborn solution, Seaborn or Plotly. So I strongly recommend that do not have things which are away from your programming language. It's best to keep Seaborn or Plotly with you and work with those things. Matplotlib also works. And Shashwat Goyal says that, is this our performance from 2019? No, our performance in 2019 was 700 something rank and 50th in the country or something. This is our performance from kind of today. When we tried to recreate using basic DFSs. We found other solutions, but all of the online solutions are actually slightly more respectable. Like they actually use TSP solvers. They have better online greedies than us. When they do DFSs, they don't just come up with a random DFS. Like they just don't go down random children. Like the standard approach that you'd find in a book is at least beam search, although I don't think anyone used beam search on this one. But you'd keep like 5 or 6 nodes in your stack of the things you want to keep on doing your DFS on, and you would explore all of them, and you would do the DFS multiple times. So these are just time efficient and easy ways to come up with code that just works. And
right, even when we got the first 700, I think like it was our first attempt, right, 2 years ago. So like it's not like even then like we did not really have an idea of what to do, so we were just trying to do whatever we thought.
Yeah.
But like, of course, we knew we had to do ED and all that, but then we did not have really a clear picture. So today we are trying to get you home with a clear picture, that don't try to be super fancy, super aggressive, think simple and try to do EDA properly. Look at the pattern. Like in this, like for example, this graph that you see on my screen, you might not find any impressive pattern, but for the problem B, this says something. Like, this is trying to make a statement that look at me and try to model me as a particular problem, like an undirected graph or something. So we want to tell you that look at the EDA carefully
Can you
for
go
red
down and
flags,
see?
right?
the bottom?
And TQDM and all those simple approaches that get you a decent score for your first hash code attempt. So yeah, and of course you need a lot of practice. Like even when I did this in half an hour on stream right now, I had practiced it before, and I also like knew I obviously have practice in Python, so all that comes in handy. So you obviously need a lot of practice, but that is true for literally anything, even code forces or any other field also. So that's not the point, but yeah.
So I don't know what Shashwat is trying to say, that we had solved the problem before we read the blogs. But yeah, the blogs are very different from our approach. So
Yeah,
it
this
doesn't
is, so
really
if you
matter.
read the code forces blogs, they're talking about TSP and many other things, but anyway, so
Yeah.
let's go to
Just
EDSC
take a look
and
at the final thing.
right, this the
Like
correlation.
after you are done with the problem, you actually want to check that you have done a good job. And for that, you plot the initial correlation map. So this is the correlation map of all pairs I comma j, how many points you would get if I was just next to j. And you notice that the initial input is kind of random. And oh yeah, I know you're not accusing of anything, but no, I mean, I would say that, no, what I meant to say is that we have, like, the official approaches are significantly different enough that this is kind of the ultra basic approach, and I still feel that you can code this up. Like, at least I had not seen the blogs before I was coding this up. And at the point in time when we did the DFS, we had seen the blogs, but the blogs were much better. So
This
anyway,
GFS won't be anywhere. And like another
Yeah.
point that like when we participated 2 years ago,
You can code
I
it.
think all of us like knew Python and basic graphing, but still we couldn't manage this. And like this is a pretty like straightforward way to look at the problem. That like let's take greedy graph for instance. Let's just look at it once again, and it's doing what like any of us should be doing on the first attempt. Just pair up all the vertical images and just try to arrange the slides. That's all it's doing, and it gets a very bad score on B, but it gets a decent score on E. So worth trying out. Again, like it one thing, another that it's very hard to predict what will work. So Shashwat is correct here in saying that we know that these approaches will work, so that's why we are only showing these approaches. But like in contest, you'll be trying a lot of approaches that just won't work. So that is something that you will have to like accept that yeah, this is going to happen. You're going to code up something for half an hour and you're going to run it and it's like not going to work. But like that is going to happen, so we can't help it. Like again, we can't show you the approaches that don't work on stream. That would be a slight waste of time unless there is some heavy instructional value in there. But that is something that does happen, so keep it in mind. Anyway, back to the correlation.
Yeah. Basically, like when we were doing it live, we only managed to get the greedy graph running. We did not have an online greedy. We did not have a DFS in first year.
Right.
And that also got us a reasonable rank, so not bad. And finally, you want to check if your solution is correct. And to check your solution is correct, you make this plot of your score for all pairs. And then you go down and you see what happens after you have sorted your stuff out. And you notice that you have this diagonal line. And there is some brightness at the top left. So maybe that is the place where you want to optimize more. But at the bottom right corner and the rest of the map, it seems significantly darker than the diagonal line. And this is what you want, right? Because you get points for the diagonal line, but you don't get points for anything else. So you
Let
want
me
to
just
make your
like point
diagonal
out
line
what the line actually means. So for those who are not familiar with correlation plots, this plot like y-axis and x-axis is a n cross n pairing of all the different photos. So here you have roughly 950 photos, and you're just calculating their overlap score. Like if I take this photo and then I take this photo after it, like just basically put them one after the other and calculate their score, then what is the score I'm getting? So as you can see, it's pretty randomly distributed. Like it's not clear what the approach is, like what is going on in the slideshow. as Animesh said, you get points for the diagonal line, which means that he's trying to say that you get points when you have overlap between the first and the second value, the second and third value, the third and fourth, the fourth and fifth, and so on. So these things will lie on the diagonal, right? So if you take this as a big Cartesian coordinate, then 0 and 1 will lie at the top left, then 1 and 2 somewhere near it, then middle somewhere here, and then all the way down. So it will be some kind of a diagonal line. So if your data does not show a diagonal line in the correlation plot, and here the strength of the pixel in this dot is the value of the intersection, or the value of the score, like the minimum of the intersection and the left right difference. So here the more bright, like the brighter point is 4 and the darker is 0. So as you can see, nothing is particularly bright. This is a dark region. Then we come to this and we are like, now I see some diagonal line going on. So this is the score that we'll get. We'll get score for the two consecutive parts. So as you can see, we have sorted out the later slides pretty well, but maybe we can do something about the first few slides. Like maybe we need to change our approach somehow to get this, like this part shows a lot of like, what do you call it, noise. And again, this is a pretty good score, like 1533 is already very near the best score, which was I think 1600 or something. This is already pretty good, but it shows us that it can be improved better. So
Yeah, so yeah,
and this will be
just
different.
close with
This will be different for different problems. Like this, we are just showing for the photo slideshow, but like it will be different for different different problems. So maybe one good thing you can do from today, like you still have a lot of days, 15 days to prepare for Hashcode. One good thing you can do is look at the older problems, like maybe the 2020 qualifier problem or the recent PISA qualifier problem. Again, I'm trying to get you, like you should at least be solving the older problems because they have more discussion around them. That's why we picked the 2019 one, because you'll find a lot of stuff about this problem online. So that's the reason why we picked this. But you can also try the latest problems as well. Like there's a practice round
let's
going
just
on.
say that 2020 will be hard. Like it's always better to start with the earlier problems. The first ever Hashcode problem is really nice, small data, easy to work with, and the more recent problems become harder because people get more accustomed to things. So the server problem, that's the first ever Hashcode problem, is one of the best problems to start solving and has very easy EDA.
Which
Yeah,
one? The
coding
server
competitions dot.
qualification round, right? This.
Because Moore's law.
So yeah, I mean, you can just, again, the task is like, it's always the similar every time. There is nice diagrams, an input file, an example, and then an output. And again, you do the EDA and all over that. A couple of things you'll notice that we use PyCharm and all, which you should be using ideally. And you'll find good introductions on pretty much anywhere, like maybe Geeks for Geeks or something. So just like do check them out and do get accustomed to Python. I don't think you can do graphing anywhere else better than Python, like more simplistically as we do in Python. So like it's like
Let me
if you take a look at this heat map, it took just one line of function to plot this heat map. So it's this level of ease you will not get anywhere. Anyway, we are pretty much done with the what we're trying to cover. Like if you
I just wanted to add a couple of more comments here that for more of our advanced friends, if you have certain patterns in the data, particularly like if you have something in the top left corner that you can see, it's a very wise idea to go for a local search here. We have a local search module in our code, and it has a simulated annealing setup. So that did not give us good results here, but it can give you good results. We were trying that. We have tried out a bunch of other things which didn't really quite work out. So it's true that, yeah, I mean, most of the presentation was based on things that actually work, and a lot of what didn't work even in practice after looking at the blogs has been removed from the session. And the other things is that you should always try to code up iterative DFSs and BFSs instead of coding up recursive ones, because it's much easier to change it into a beam search if you want to and randomize in the beam search. So yeah, that's another thing. I guess that's it. All comments.
Right. So now we are pretty much done with the session. If you have more questions and comments, you can stick around for post session discussion. Otherwise, you have covered the basic gist. You can find all of the codes on the GitHub repo, including this failed code. So again, that this points to what we were saying earlier. Some things just don't work, and you can't really figure out why. So this is one of them that did not work. And okay, anyways, quick intro to local search. So again, we're done with the session.
Okay. Yeah.
You can just keep asking questions, and we'll keep answering them.
Yeah. So basically, local search is the idea that if you are given an entire array and you see that some part of your array is really not working out, then you just start swapping randomly and pray to God that things work. Right. So that's more or less it. You just find two random people anywhere or near each other for some, like if you know that the problem is in some small region, then you find that region. And how do you know? You know by looking at the correlation plot that the region surrounding it is bright and the diagonal line is not really that bright. So there are other ways to find out what space is the problem. And you isolate this place and you find any two elements in this place, any two images, any two slides, and you just start swapping them. And how do you swap them? Like, so this is the idea of simulated annealing. If you know what annealing is the idea that you heat a metal strongly and you allow, like, it keeps on crossing what would be called the potential boundary, or basically the metal is soft and red hot, and as you slowly allow it to cool, it settles into the strongest or the brittlest or whatever desired property state it is. I don't really know what you anneal for. You quench for brittleness, you anneal for strength, I think. But anyways, doesn't matter. So the idea of annealing is that you keep on swapping, and if the score increases, you obviously accept the swap. And even if the score decreases, you can still accept the swap with probability e to the power minus delta score by temperature, which is kind of similar to a times e to the power minus EA by RT, which would be the annealing function for chemical kinetics. So that's where the idea comes from, that to occupy the lowest energy state or the highest score state in this case, we are looking at score as negative of energy in physics. And we are trying to do this random swap optimization that keep on swapping things the way nature keeps on swapping in and out of potential wells until something good happens. All of these are very pray to God heuristic approaches. And sadly, we have tried this several times over the past year, and it has never worked out for me. But I know that there are a lot of people who say that it's always correct, and a lot of people who just keep publishing papers on this. So, yeah.
Right. I mean, that might have been a bit hard to understand, but anyway, the general idea of local search, that was the original question, is essentially saying that I have reduced my sample space. So I'm not checking the global space. I know what part to look at. I'm just going to look at that. And by looking at that, I'm basically saying I'm just going to do random swaps in that particular area. I'm going to do the exact same thing or something similar, but on a shorter sample size, so that I can maybe get a bit more iterations inside and run it for longer. So yeah, that's the, like, just saying that it's local search. And yeah,
Right.
Shashwat
It
has
relies on the
pasted
fact that,
a very nice
Nikhil.
blog link. Like, he and Nikhil wrote it some time ago, and like you should like definitely check it out. And they described in great detail what observations went into their handling of problem statement, which I don't remember, but it was a very nice blog. I remember reading it a couple of times earlier. So, and again, of course, practice on the older problem sets, like Animesh pointed out, the server data set. Oh, it's a local. Oh, wait. Acha, okay. I remember Shashwat also pasted wrote some hash code blog as well. But anyway, like, that is also there. But anyway,
For which
yeah.
one? 2020 or 2019?
I remember reading something like they obtained a very nice score in maybe less than 4 hours on a live session. So
Okay, I think this is their notes from the course that they took on.
okay, never mind. Anyway, I did not
Okay.
open the link. So anyway, yeah, more questions. Like, it's okay if you did not get the entire session, but like now that you stick to the end, you can ask questions. So like, you can ask if you didn't get something also. So feel free to ask. We did not have a lot of questions in between, so I'm understanding you must have had a lot of doubts. So maybe you can ask them.
How do you do this parallelization in Python?
You mean paralyze as in like just paralyze the code?
Yeah, you mentioned running it on it or something.
You import
So
threading. I
no,
mean,
you don't import threading, please. You
okay.
import ray, and you just call ray dot star distribute star or something. Ray is the general purpose library, which will just, you can just call it on star distribution or something like that, and it will implicitly handle all the message passing that you want to do. If you are using some sort of neural network, Torch has its own distributed data parallel module, or same with TensorFlow. But yeah, if you're doing classical stuff, Ray is the one-stop solution for everything. Just 2 or 3 functions, and you're done.
All right.
Yeah. If you want to go the MPI way, then you can thread. Yeah, that's it, I guess. And yeah, Shashwat's blog seems slightly advanced, but amazing. It's definitely advanced.
Anyways, did we try gradient descent? Okay, what are we trying to paralyze here, by the way? Nikhil's asking.
No, nothing. Like if you want to run searches, so you are essentially running a combinatorial search, right? So one
Local or
part
even
of the
local
search doesn't
searches.
really. Your local searches, your greedies, like even your greedies relied on the fact that you are searching through 100 nodes. If you have 10 different cores, you can search through 1000 nodes, 100 on each, and each node can return the best answer. So combinatorial searches are inherently very parallelizable because even
Achha,
machine
okay,
learning depends
okay.
on each other.
You mean that in this tries part, I mean, I can paralyze this part, right?
Yeah,
That's
you
what you're
can
trying to.
amazingly
Right.
parallelize that part.
Because all these runs are essentially independent flips of a coin, if you would say. So I can do coin flips in parallel.
Right.
Did we try gradient descent some time ago?
For
I
what?
think
You cannot
for-
gradient descent on this, right? That's the whole problem, that because you have a combinatorial search space, which is of the size, so gradient descent relies on the fact that your entire search space is compact, and in that compact search space, there are smooth undulations. Like for an image of a
Okay.
dog, if you change 1 pixel, it will not become a cat.
Can we
The
say that
problem
like
here is that
there is no function that can define the score? Like you cannot
the
come up
function is
with
not
a
smooth.
No, like you can say there's a function, but like your input to the function is some permutation, no? As in, how do you do any kind of descent over that space?
Yeah, permutation is very hard to descend upon. However, please note that there is this discovery by DeepMind called sorting networks, which actually manages to do gradient descent on exactly this sort of space, but it does not manage to win hash code. We know this from other people's experience, not our own. And this is the idea that if you do not know how to sort a bunch of numbers, but you have someone else telling you how good or bad a particular sorting is, then DeepMind sorting networks manages to sort the whole thing. However, that's more advanced AI than I guess any of us know. So letting that be. The general idea is going to be that you can train a multi-agent reinforcement learning task and then try to have individual swappers which learn some sort of function on where they want to be placed and then progress from there. But that's too much to do in this time. So yeah. Should we wrap up, Karan?
Yeah, I think we should. We are pretty much done. If you guys have any questions, like you can just post them on the programming loop club. If there are a lot of questions, you can create a new Hashcode channel or whatever. So don't worry about that. Like guys can also, you guys should start forming teams, register yourselves on the Hashcode portal, and look at our codes, look at other solutions, and like start practicing. Like you have a lot of time. That's why we did this so early. And good luck. So yeah, I guess we can. I will stop the recording now, and